Today we will be looking at two horrifying caving stories that went horribly wrong. As always, viewer discretion is advised. October 12th, 2024, Hunter Valley, New South Wales, Australia. The morning had started like countless others in this rugged corner of southeastern Australia. Matilda Campbell, 23, had made plans with friends to explore one of the region's lesser-known hiking trails. The forecast promised clear skies and mild temperatures, perfect conditions for navigating the challenging terrain. By mid-afternoon, the group had covered several miles, weaving between house-sized rocks that created natural corridors and chambers. The landscape here tells geological stories in stone, weathered surfaces, deep cracks, and towering formations that have stood sentinel for eons. Unlike manicured national parks with marked trails and safety barriers, this was raw wilderness where hikers relied entirely on their own judgment and instincts. Matilda had stopped to capture a photograph. The valley stretched out below, bathed in golden light that would vanish within minutes as the sun continued its arc across the sky. She pulled out her phone, framed the shot, and in that brief moment of divided attention, her grip became loose. The device slipped from her hand. It tumbled into a narrow gap between two massive boulders, disappearing into the darkness below with a series of sharp clicks as it bounced off stone walls. The crevice itself measured barely 18 inches across at the surface, a vertical crack created when ancient geological forces had pushed these enormous rocks together, leaving just enough space between them to swallow anything that fell inside. Matilda knelt at the edge and peered down. There, perhaps 10 feet below, she could make out her phone resting on a narrow ledge. The screen was still intact. The case hadn't cracked. It looked completely retrievable. The mathematics of the situation seemed straightforward. The gap was narrow but appeared navigable. The depth was significant but manageable. The phone was visible and within reach. What she couldn't see, what no one standing at the surface could possibly see, was how the geometry of the crevice changed deeper down, how the walls narrowed and twisted in ways that would transform a simple retrieval into a life-threatening trap. Matilda positioned herself at the opening. The plan was simple: lower herself headfirst into the gap, grab the phone, and pull herself back up. Her friends expressed concern, but she had already committed to the attempt. She eased her upper body into the crevice, arms extended downward, shoulders scraping against rough granite on both sides. The descent began without incident. The walls pressed in, but there was still room to maneuver, still room to breathe. She angled her body to navigate around a protruding section of rock, pushing deeper into the gap. Her fingertips were now just inches from the phone. One more push and she would have it. That's when the geometry betrayed her. The crevice narrowed sharply at a point roughly 3 feet below the surface. Her hips caught on the converging walls. She tried to reverse course, but her body had wedged into a configuration where the pressure from both sides created enormous friction. She attempted to push forward instead, thinking she could slip through the narrow section. Her center of gravity shifted past the critical point. Gravity seized control. Matilda plunged downward in a violent, uncontrolled descent. In the span of 2 seconds, her body rotated fully inverted and dropped approximately 7 feet before the walls closed in completely. She came to an abrupt, crushing stop, jammed between the boulders in the worst possible orientation a human body could assume. Her head pointed straight down toward the earth, blood immediately beginning to pool in her skull. Her legs jutted upward toward the surface, visible to her friends above, but utterly useless for escape. Her arms were pinned at awkward angles against the rock walls, trapped in positions that prevented any meaningful movement. The full weight of her torso compressed her diaphragm, turning each breath into a labored struggle against her own body weight. She tried to move. The rocks held her immobile. The panic that flooded her nervous system was met with a terrifying realization. She was completely, utterly trapped in a position that would kill her if she remained there long enough. Her friends saw only her legs protruding from the crevice, kicking in desperate, frantic movements. They grabbed her ankles immediately and pulled with combined strength. Her body didn't shift even a fraction of an inch. The rocks had locked her into a grip that defied human force. They tried different angles, different holds, coordinated pulling with all their weight. Nothing worked. The specific way she had wedged herself made extraction impossible without moving the boulders themselves, something that would require equipment, expertise, and time. The emergency call went out at 2:47 p.m. The dispatcher receiving the information struggled to fully grasp what was being described. A person trapped upside down between rocks, 7 feet deep, still conscious. Unknown duration of survivability. The details were relayed across emergency networks throughout the region. Peter Watts had served as a rescue paramedic for 10 years. His career had taken him into burning buildings, down cliff faces, through collapsed structures, and into flood zones where water moved with lethal force. He had extracted people from situations that seemed impossible. With that confidence, he immediately reached the scene along with his team. There, realization set in. He was wrong. The scene that greeted him and the assembled rescue teams was unlike anything in the collective memory of anyone present. Matilda's legs extended from the narrow crevice at an unnatural angle, the only visible evidence of a human being trapped somewhere below. Beneath the surface, invisible to rescuers, her body was compressed between walls of solid granite that would not yield to anything less than massive force. The medical clock was already running. The human body operates on the assumption that the head will remain above the heart, that blood will flow in predictable patterns, that organs will settle in their designated positions. Invert these assumptions for extended periods and the systems begin to fail. Blood pools in the brain, increasing intracranial pressure to dangerous levels. The heart struggles to pump against reversed gravity, working harder with each passing minute. The weight of organs presses down on the diaphragm, making each breath increasingly difficult. After several hours in this position, the risk of stroke, organ failure, pulmonary complications, Matilda had already been inverted for over 90 minutes. The rescue teams faced a problem that existed in 3 dimensions and 4 constraints. First, they needed to remove enough rock to create a pathway for extraction. Second, they could not disturb the boulder formation in ways that would cause collapse. Third, they had to work fast enough to prevent medical catastrophe. Fourth, they had to accomplish all of this while a young woman remained conscious, terrified, and trapped in a position that was slowly killing her. The structural assessment began immediately. Engineers examined the boulder field, identifying which rocks were load-bearing, which were merely resting against others, and which could be safely moved. The formation wasn't a simple stack. It was a complex interlocking puzzle where each piece supported others through friction, weight distribution, and pressure. Remove the wrong boulder and hundreds of tons of granite could shift, crushing Matilda instantly, or trapping her so deeply that extraction would become impossible. The team identified roughly a dozen boulders that would need to be removed or shifted to create an extraction path. Among them was a massive piece of granite estimated at over 1,000 pounds, a rock that had settled into its current position thousands of years ago and had no intention of moving easily. But the most immediate concern was preventing collapse during the removal process. The solution came in the form of a wooden frame, a temporary structure that would be built around Matilda's trapped body, holding the surrounding rocks in place, even as key pieces were removed. The frame would act as a skeleton, maintaining the integrity of the formation while the rescue proceeded. Construction began. Workers lowered lumber into the crevice, fitting pieces around Matilda's legs and torso, creating a protective cage. The actual boulder removal began once the frame was secured. 3 hours had passed. Specialized equipment was brought in, hydraulic spreaders, high-capacity pulleys, leverage bars designed to move objects that weighed as much as small vehicles. The team selected their first target, a 400-pound boulder that was pinning Matilda's left shoulder. Chains were wrapped around it. The pulley system was engaged. Workers pulled in synchronized rhythm. The boulder shifted 1 inch, then another. Slowly, agonizingly, the team extracted it from the formation and set it aside. 1 down, 11 to go. The second boulder proved more difficult. It had settled into a position where 3 other rocks rested partially against it. 20 minutes of work to shift it 6 inches. 40 minutes to extract it completely. 4 hours had passed. Matilda's body was sending distress signals that she couldn't ignore. The headache had progressed from uncomfortable to agonizing. Her vision had begun to blur at the edges. Her fingers and toes tingled with poor circulation. She could hear the rescue teams working above her, but she couldn't see them, couldn't communicate with them effectively. The massive 1,000-pound boulder came next. This was the keystone, the rock that, once removed, would create enough space for the final extraction. But it was also the most dangerous piece. It was load-bearing, supporting at least 2 other boulders that together weighed over half a ton. The frame would have to hold that weight while the extraction proceeded. The team attached multiple chains. They positioned hydraulic jacks at strategic points. As the hydraulic jacks strained, workers added their own strength to the effort, pulling and pushing and leveraging every advantage they could find. The boulder moved, not much, just a few inches at first. But those inches created space, and space meant progress. Over the next hour, the team worked that boulder free from its resting place, millimeter by millimeter, until finally it cleared the formation entirely and was rolled away to safety. 6 hours had passed. The extraction path was nearly clear. A few smaller rocks remained, obstacles that could be removed relatively quickly. But the teams were running out of time. Matilda's responses to questions had become sluggish. Her movements had weakened. The final boulders came out in rapid succession. The rescue team had found their rhythm, their system perfected through hours of hard-won experience. Each rock that cleared the path brought them closer to the moment they had been working toward since the beginning. 7 hours after Matilda Campbell had slipped into that crevice, the pathway was finally clear. The extraction itself required infinite care. Her body had been compressed and inverted for so long that any sudden movement could trigger medical complications. The team supported her head and neck, protecting her spine as they carefully maneuvered her through the gaps they had created. They lifted her slowly, rotating her body gradually back toward a normal orientation, monitoring her condition with every inch of progress. Her legs emerged from the crevice, then her torso, then her shoulders. Finally, her head emerged from the opening, and Matilda Campbell was laid gently on solid ground, right side up for the first time in 7 hours. The medical assessment revealed bruises covering most of her body, and a collection of minor scratches from the rough granite. But miraculously, impossibly, there were no broken bones, no serious internal injuries, no life-threatening trauma. Against odds that should have killed her, she had survived. Peter Watts would later describe it as the most challenging rescue operation of his entire career. In the days that followed, Matilda thanked her rescuers through social media posts that quickly went viral, where she added a final observation, one delivered with the kind of humor that only someone who has survived the unsurvivable can truly appreciate. She wrote, "Thank you to the team who saved me. You guys are literally lifesavers. Too bad about the phone, though." She acknowledged the incredible effort, the skill, the determination that had saved her life. October 21st, 2023, McCain Valley Road, Boulevard, California. The Thunder Canyon Caves sit deep in San Diego County's backcountry, a labyrinth of narrow passages carved through ancient rock over millions of years. The caves attract adventurers seeking the thrill of squeezing through tight spaces, exploring chambers that most people will never see, venturing into darkness that exists nowhere else on Earth. But these caves hold no sympathy for mistakes, no forgiveness for miscalculation. And on this particular Saturday afternoon, they were about to claim another victim. A woman whose name was never released to the public had spent the day exploring the cave system with friends. They had hiked for hours just to reach the entrance, following rough trails through rugged terrain that kept casual visitors away. The group came prepared with headlamps, proper gear, and the confidence that comes from previous caving experience. They knew the risks, they understood the dangers. They had done this before. Inside the cave, the world transforms. Sunlight disappears within feet of the entrance, replaced by absolute darkness that swallows everything. The temperature drops. The sound behaves strangely. The rock closes in from all sides, creating passages that twist and turn in ways that disorient even experienced spelunkers. The woman had been navigating through the cave system for some time when she encountered a particularly narrow opening. The passage ahead looked passable, tight, but manageable. She had squeezed through dozens of similar gaps throughout the day. Her headlamp beam cut through the darkness, showing rock walls that converged to a space roughly 12 inches wide. A foot of clearance, barely enough room for a human body to pass through if positioned correctly. She committed to the passage. The first few feet went smoothly. Her body slipped through the narrow gap, shoulders scraping against stone on both sides. She angled herself to accommodate the irregular walls, finding the path of least resistance. But cave passages don't maintain consistent dimensions. They narrow and widen unpredictably, following the whims of ancient geological forces that created them. Halfway through the passage, the geometry changed. The walls pressed in from both sides. Her shoulders caught. She tried to adjust her position, but the rock held her firm. She attempted to push forward. The gap was too narrow. She tried to reverse course, backing out the way she had come. Her body wouldn't budge. The specific angle of her torso, combined with the irregular shape of the rock walls, had created a wedge. The harder she pushed in either direction, the tighter the rock gripped her. She was stuck. Completely, utterly stuck in a gap, barely wider than a sheet of paper, buried deep inside a cave system that would take hours just to reach from the outside world. Her friends realized something was wrong when her forward progress stopped. They could see her headlamp beam frozen in place, could hear the strain in her breathing as she struggled against the stone. They tried to help immediately, grabbing whatever parts of her they could reach, pulling with combined strength. Nothing worked. They tried different angles, different techniques, different positions. The rock refused to release its grip. Minutes turned into an hour. The woman's breathing became more labored. The physical and psychological toll of being trapped in absolute darkness, unable to move, surrounded by crushing stone, began to mount. Her friends faced an agonizing decision. They could keep trying to free her themselves, wasting precious time and potentially injuring her in the process. Or they could leave her alone in the darkness while they hiked out to call for help. Just before 6 p.m., they made the call. The emergency request that reached San Diego County Sheriff's Department painted a dire picture. A woman trapped in a cave, stuck in a passage 12 inches wide. Location deep inside the Thunder Canyon system. Unknown duration of entrapment possible. The immediate response involved deputies from the Sheriff's Rural Division and volunteers from the Search and Rescue Division, people trained specifically for these types of extreme extractions. But the situation required more than local resources. California Office of Emergency Services was contacted. A specialized cave rescue team from San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department was requested. These weren't ordinary rescue operations. Cave rescues demand specific skills, specific equipment, and specific knowledge that most emergency responders never acquire. The teams assembled their gear and began the long approach to the caves. Just reaching the entrance required hours of hiking through rough terrain in growing darkness. Once inside, the real challenge began. The passages leading to the trapped woman were so narrow that rescuers had to inch their way forward, moving in a prone position, pushing their equipment ahead of them because there wasn't room to carry it normally. Every piece of rescue gear had to be passed along a human chain, handed from one rescuer to the next through passages that barely accommodated a single body. Ropes, pulleys, medical supplies, blankets. Each item made the journey through dozens of hands, moving deeper into the earth at an agonizingly slow pace. When rescuers finally reached the woman, they found her wedged exactly as described, caught in a 12-inch gap with no room to maneuver. But the immediate priority wasn't extraction, it was survival. The cave's temperature was low enough to cause hypothermia over extended exposure. The woman had been trapped for hours, unable to generate body heat through movement, losing warmth to the surrounding stone. Rescuers wrapped her in blankets, creating an insulation barrier between her body and the rock. They assessed her medical condition as best they could in the cramped space. They talked to her, keeping her conscious and aware, fighting the psychological breakdown that comes from prolonged entrapment. Then the real work began. Extracting someone from a 12-inch gap requires precision that borders on the surgical. The rescuers couldn't simply pull her out. The rock would tear her apart. They had to change the geometry. Using roping mechanisms, they created a system of controlled movement, slight adjustments, millimeter shifts, gradually repositioning her body to find the exact angle that would allow passage through the gap that had captured her. The process took hours. Throughout the night and into the next morning, the rescue teams worked in shifts, maintaining constant pressure on the extraction operation while managing their own exhaustion in the confined space. The woman remained trapped, surrounded by people trying to save her, but unable to free herself, existing in a nightmare of stone and darkness. Sunday morning, October 22nd, 16 hours after she had first become trapped. The final adjustments aligned. The roping mechanism engaged one last time. The woman's body shifted through the narrow passage, millimeter by millimeter, until suddenly the rock released its grip. She was free. The journey out of the cave took additional hours. Rescuers had to guide her through the same narrow passages they had navigated on the way in, supporting her exhausted body, ensuring she didn't become trapped again in a different location. When they finally emerged into daylight, a CAL fire helicopter was waiting. The aircraft lifted her to a safe landing zone where ambulances stood ready. Medical personnel treated her for exhaustion, scrapes covering most of her exposed skin, and bruises that marked every point where rock had pressed against flesh. But she was alive. Against the suffocating darkness, the crushing stone, and the psychological horror of 16 hours trapped in absolute helplessness, she had survived. The sheriff's department later released safety reminders that seemed almost quaint given what had just occurred. Never cave alone. Tell someone where you're going. Watch for tight crevices. Bring light sources. Practical advice that couldn't capture the existential terror of being wedged in stone. Couldn't convey the specific nightmare of discovering that your body won't move no matter how hard you try. Couldn't express the awful realization that you are utterly dependent on others to save you from a prison of your own making. The woman recovered from her physical injuries. The psychological scars from 16 hours trapped in a 12-inch gap, buried deep in the Thunder Canyon caves, surrounded by crushing darkness and unyielding stone, those wounds would take considerably longer to heal. And somewhere deep in those caves, that narrow passage still exists, waiting patiently for the next person who believes they can make it through.